everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Schmoozin with Forouzan. We're here with the founder of ADR Services, Miss Lucie Barron. Lucie, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be
Thank
here.
you. Thank you for being on. For those of you who don't know, Lucie's a very busy woman. How many mediators are in your portfolio right now?
Around 145 across the state.
And so you're responsible for 145 mediators throughout the state of California.
Yes, I certainly am.
Okay. And how much coffee do you drink every day, or are you just naturally able to do this?
I don't drink coffee that much during the day. I
Really?
used to drink coffee a lot, but no, I'm pretty much awake. I have to be alert. The lawyers keep me alert.
The lawyers keep me alert.
The question is, how much alcohol do I drink at night?
Ah,
But that's a totally different question.
we'll save that.
Actually, I'm on a diet, so I'm not drinking any alcohol.
Okay.
But the lawyers, the cases, we have so many cases and so many challenges. They certainly, certainly keep me on my toes during the day.
How many offices does ADR have in California?
We have 7. We have 3 in Northern California, San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose. And in Southern California, we have Century City, downtown, Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Diego.
All right. And which, if you were just to give me a rough estimate, would you say NorCal is more busy, or would you say SoCal is more busy?
I think Southern California is busier. I know it's busier because we have all of the statistics. So yes, absolutely.
Do you have a feeling as to why Southern California is more busy?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think because, for example, San Diego is not really busy at all. Okay, and I think it's a matter of relationships and why people are in conflict and how they settle and who they go to and why. And sometimes if you're in a small community, you don't need an outsider mediator, or, and you resolve your case before it goes to arbitration. And if you're in a big fight with someone, you do less discovery than you might otherwise. So that's San Diego. On the other hand, San Francisco, I think, has a different kind of culture, but the culture also is that, we are professionals. We will come across each other at some point again in our career, or our clients will. And so that, they behave better. The lawyers in Los Angeles may never see the same judge again. They'll see him or her once, all right, and that will be the end of that. And half the time they don't see them to begin with. They'll send, an associate or someone to the court. So there's a lot more opportunity to get away with a lot more. And that's not the lawyers, it's also their clients, it's people in general. You can hide in LA. LA is the 4th most populous city in the world. I don't know if you're aware of that, but if you look at some of these statistics, it's gigantic. So something like 18 million, or 17.8 million. So a lot bigger than anyone knew or really anticipated. But, that's a really big city, really easy place where you can do things and never be found again. A lot more difficult now, with the social media, but still, and so there's a lot more litigation. Just another piece of statistic that, you may or may not know is that, the California as a state, I'm sure is the 5th largest economy in the world. That's the 5th largest country, all on its own. They're only really, in terms of economic activity, only 4 other countries that are bigger than California. Okay, so and that's the first statistic. The second is that California has something like 12% of the population of the state resides in California, and we have something like 58% of the litigation.
Wow.
So if you want to sue, here's your home. So I'll be sued, So pretty amazing, huh? Pretty amazing.
Yeah. I didn't know that statistic. Like, I get it. Los Angeles, Southern California, California as a whole is pretty litigious, I would imagine. Yeah. I didn't realize it was that litigious. That's pretty crazy.
Pretty litigious. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, it's an interesting thing to me. Someone once said this to me, and I'm actually going to extend the comment to you. I'm curious what you have to say. Someone once complained to me. They said, "Oh God, all these lawyers, all these lawsuits, gunking things up." And I'm not saying that there aren't lawyers out there who gunk things up with their lawsuits. I am not taking that off the table. But what I would put on the table in addition to that is I remember I was at a trial. It was in Riverside. It was 5 weeks long. And I promise if we allowed the clients to get into a room and try to resolve the issues on their own, fisticuffs would have started flying. They would have torn each other apart. And I made that point to the person. I'm like, look, sometimes you need the civil lawyers. They serve as lubrication for these things to go forward. And what's interesting is, who do the lawyers look to for lubrication to make things go forward? We look to the mediators. So I'm kind of curious on your take in terms of the overall big picture. How does mediation fit into Southern California, or frankly, all of California's legal statute, in your opinion?
I'm not sure exactly what that question encompasses. I mean, how does it fit in litigation? I mean, I can tell you that, something like 1.7% of cases go to trial. So, everything else will be resolved somewhere along the wayside. So it fits in enormously. It's if that's the kind of, question you're asking, but it's extraordinary. And this is on the state side and the federal side. I think it's on the federal side, it's just maybe like 2.1% of cases go to trial, but again, very small numbers. So if you file, what happens is that, so we do mediation, arbitration, 638 references, 639 references, anything that's available in the private sector. So the way that I've always looked at this industry is that you have the public court system and then you have the private court system. And, it's easier to do this kind of on a board to see it very, quickly. But on the public side, you will file, a summons or a complaint, and then a judge will be assigned, and some time will take. Without COVID, it used to go faster than later, more quickly, and then there'll be some discovery, and eventually, there'll be a trial, and you'll get a verdict, right? That's kind of the path, and then the other side may or may not appeal. In between that, what's really developed over the last 30 or 40 years is that this little animal that used to be called, MSC, or, a voluntary settlement conference or a mandatory settlement conference, and the case would go there somewhere. There was a bill that was passed called Senate Bill 401 in 1993, I think, maybe in 1994. And that gave the judges the authority to order cases out to mediation. They were actually able to do that, ordered out for mediation, as long as a case had a value of $50,000 or less. So that was a criterion. And then you, of course, couldn't charge. You couldn't charge a client, couldn't order, a judge couldn't order them. And they picked 10 courthouses in LA and then 20 to run this experiment. And they found that unlike judicial arbitration, which is what was very common at that time, if you had a settlement conference, the case would have a much higher chance of settling, something 55 to 60%, which in the private sector is not that high, but it was considered to be very high in the court system. Whereas if you had judicial arbitration, 90% or 95% of those would just come back. So it became a very effective tool to use. So that's a public side. On the private side, what you had then were arbitrations, and these were written into contracts. So there wasn't any distinction between consumer arbitrations and contractual arbitrations. It was just an arbitration. And so if you, had an alternative to file your lawsuit other than go to the court, you would write in an arbitration provision. I would just say a company would do that. Construction company was really big at the beginning in construction. And then if there was a dispute, real estate, anything, they would invoke the arbitration provision. And what they found was that, over time that was becoming the legal community, I'm saying, or the business end of the legal community. Very time, it was very time consuming and super expensive. And so before the arbitration, this same kind of little animal, except it was called mediation, on the private side, rather than the MSC or the VSC, and mediation kind of grew up, and the cases started to be resolved, referred to be resolved to mediation. And what happens when you get a good mediator is that you will, the mediator, whether it's a judge or a lawyer, will most likely settle that case. A good mediator will settle between 90 to 95% of his or her cases. But the chances are super high your case will go away. Not sure if that's a question you asked, but that's how it fits in.
You hit the nail on the head, because some people watching this are not actually lawyers. They might not be super familiar with mediation. So I appreciate you saying that. How hands-on are you in terms of when ADR brings in a new mediator, and I see the emails and I try to send congratulatory responses.
Thank you.
When you guys bring on the new mediators, are you hands-on in terms of selecting mediators?
Yeah, very much so. I follow the marketplace. Totally, completely, and utterly, and always have done. I started this firm, from me, the only employee. I am not a lawyer, and I won't go into that right now, but I had to really understand what value the alternative dispute resolution could bring. And I'll just focus in explaining that just on mediation. What could we contribute to the legal system? And there was a group of mediators at the time. They were all judges and that had retired and were in the private sector. And they were called, other judges called them the rent-a-judge kind of program. It was not exactly very flattering to the people that were part of this group. One of whom was David Eagleson. And those of you that remember Justice Eagleson, he came from the California Supreme Court. But there were some wonderful, wonderful retired judges that got together. They're all working independently and formed this kind of loose alliance of offering the services in the private sector. So my job is to find out who the good mediators are. For us, that's the product we market, and who the good potential arbitrators are, and who would be really good in this profession. So that's, to me, the way I see it is very different. But, building the best product, kind of like Steve Jobs did when he built the best iPhone. So it was not just an opportunity to talk at that time because you had Nokia. You wanted to communicate and have a little phone. You could just walk around, with Nokia, and that had something like 95% of the, of the market of the world. It was such a well-known product. It came from Finland, tiny little country, but, everyone had a Nokia. And then came along the iPhone and the BlackBerry. They were next before Samsung. And, they had a totally different approach. They became little computers. And by the time, the iPhone was introduced in the summer of 2007, and so that's not that long ago. You think it's like a lifetime, but, truly, that's like 14 years. And within a period of, 4 or 5 years, there was as much information, data on the iPhone as there was to put Neil Armstrong on the moon, as NASA had to put Neil Armstrong on the moon at that time. So it's absolutely phenomenal. So you have to know your product. And for me, I have to know who's out there, who's going to be out there, why they're going to be good. I think I'm pretty good at really good instincts. And I think I'm pretty good at being able to evaluate why I think someone's going to be good. And then we have this amazing, recruitment, because everyone wants the best people, team that we do presentations, to our prospective mediators. So to make sure that we do get the best mediators. And then we have a very, very sophisticated onboarding system that we work with them to make sure that they're successful in the private sector. And to give you a sense of the scope of this, actually, Dan, we have had cases with over 79,000 lawyers in the state of California. 79, and then some of them, we've had cases, 20 cases, 30 cases, 50 cases, 100 cases over the time since I started ADR, which incidentally was 1994. So we've been in business, 27 years now. So over that period, that's the number of lawyers that we've dealt with, litigators. And to give you a sense of how that fits in, I think there's something, I haven't looked recently, but I think there's something like 240,000 lawyers with an active bar license.
Wow.
Okay, so it's a lot. And then, but a lot of them are immigration attorneys or transactional attorneys, huge bulk are transactional attorneys or criminal, attorneys, and or they work for government or on a corporate side where they really are not involved in litigation at all. So our estimate is that in terms of the attorneys that are litigators, it's something like 83,000. And we've got, had at least one case with 79,000. So that means that we've, cornered 95% of the marketplace. Of all litigators in the state of California, we've had at least one case with about over 90%. So roughly 90%.
That's incredible. That's incredible. That's a mind-blowing statistic when you said you've had 80,000 of the litigators in the state of California come through your office. That is a very, very big deal. For those of you listening at home, this is not an easy thing to accomplish, to say the least. I was going to ask you about mediator selection, how you select mediators, and maybe if you can dive into that a little. But what I think everyone needs to know is you didn't just weren't exactly born and raised in the state of California, to some situation that made all this easy. You came here from another country as a single mother, if I'm not mistaken, and you started ADR. Is that correct?
Yep, I sure did. Okay. All right. So I'll give you a little background here. So I actually came from many different countries. Really. I was born in Germany. My parents are Russian, and they happened to be left there at the end of the Second World War. So they were prisoners of war, essentially. So I won't go into that background, but that's where they were. They couldn't get.
So one thing that I think everyone needs to know is you weren't just born and raised in California and, decided, hey, this is going to be a really easy endeavor. No, you are a single mother who emigrated here and started ADR. Is that correct?
Yes, it sure is.
Tell us about that, please.
Okay. So my background is this. It was very long and complex, and I'm going to summarize it for you. I was born in Germany. My parents are Russian. They left in Germany at the end of the Second World War. And I was born actually, after that time period because they couldn't get out of Germany. Nobody wanted Russians. And so we sat around there for about 5 or 6 years. And I grew up for my first few years of my childhood in a refugee camp in Hanover. And then we finally were able to get out. My parents went to Australia. They were factory workers, blue collar, very, very hardworking couple. And it was it was like really growing up in the face of pretty significant adversity. All of that, okay, although lucky me, never had to fear for my life like a lot of people need to do today. So, but I did have to worry about having food to eat. So that was one of the things. So I realized, very quickly the value of education. And, but I didn't realize it until kind of like my teen years when, after I discovered boys. And then I thought, oh gosh, a man's not going to, and even this is in Australia, So I thought what I wanted to do is just to be a good wife and have a husband that, would take care of me. That was really my goal in life. And somewhere along the wayside, I changed. And so there were a few things that happened along the wayside, and I changed, and I started to really value education. I thought learning was really important. Developing self-esteem was really important. Self-confidence was really important. I went to the University of Adelaide, and I got a bachelor's degree there in psychology. Then I went to the University of Sydney, and I moved to Sydney, and I got a master's degree in psychology. And then I got a diploma in psychology, and then I moved to Canada. I immigrated. I wanted to come to the United States. I was so desperate to come to the United States and couldn't get in. My parents couldn't get in. I couldn't get in. So the second best choice was Canada, although I love Canada, so it's never really a second choice, best choice. Anyway, so I lived there. I got married there to an Australian, and decided after my first child, I wanted to switch careers. I was a registered psychologist in Quebec, the province of Quebec. And so I went back to school, very, very driven, very hardworking. So I went back to university. I went to McGill, and I did an MBA in those times when there were not many women doing MBAs. And seeing, I was sitting around at home anyway, I thought I would finish having my family. And so it took me 3 years, it's a 2-year degree, full-time degree, to complete it. And I had more children in those years. So I had 4 children in 3.5 years. Well, now when I look back on it, I think it's total insanity. But so I'm not advising that at all. But then we did get into the United States. We had previously applied. And then when we came to the United States, I proceeded with my own insanity and had 3 more children with the same man. So 7 kids, 1 man. And then I think he had like a midlife crisis, and there was like a lot of kids in LA to take care of. I had originally been a psychologist, as I mentioned, and he was a psychiatrist. And I don't know what either of us was thinking, but it was a lot of children, and he left and he moved back to Australia. And now I'm thinking, wow, and he wasn't paying for the family. So I was thinking, and 6 of them were girls. And those of you that are women and have daughters, so watch out for those teenage years. Women just love their dads. They idolize him. He is God and or king. And then, the mother, it's really tough for the mother. So with me, it was kind of worse because my children thought that I had, and they're all like in their teenage years, except for the younger ones. And they thought I had chased their father away. So it was really difficult. So now I'm looking around. I'd worked in banking, even with all those kids. Don't know how I did that either in retrospect. But so I thought, and I'd stopped working. By the time the youngest 2 were twins, it was just like too much, even for me. So I thought, okay, I have to figure out some way to support them. And I got involved in litigation, and and I thought to myself, wow, there's got to be a better system. The case eventually resolved, and I thought there's got to be a better system for resolving disputes. I did not know at that time what an interrogatory was, how to define, pronounce, or spell the word, what a deposition was. It was just like, it's like if there are any lay people, those non-lawyers that are watching, it's like learning to, or even for the attorneys, learn, the language of the Chinese language. It is, if you're not a lawyer, you can't understand the legal system. It is just brutal, and your lawyer, no matter how great your case, or even how great your lawyer, will tell you there are no certainties, absolutely no certainty. And it's always like, it depends on the opposing counsel. It depends on, the judge. It depends on where it's venued. It depends on so many other things. So nothing is for sure. So anyway, so I thought, there has to be an alternative way to resolving disputes. And I went to UCLA. I went to the law school, tried to read as much as I could on anything I could find, including the Code of Civil Procedure. And then I went to the School of Business, the Anderson School of Business. And that was, like I said, 1993 and 94, early 94. And they were the days there was no internet. So you had to read what you wanted. And then if you wanted a copy, you had to pull it off the microfiche. And probably there was still, catalog card days, even at UCLA. And so most of you probably have no idea what I'm talking about.
I do remember the microfilm, just barely. At my local library, they had it.
At your local library. Yeah, so they were the days. And I thought, there's got to be disputes. So when I thought about that, I thought, I have to look at industries, let me think of industries where alternative dispute resolution, well, mediation, I was thinking mediation, where it really might, be helpful. And of course, there is like real estate and banking and insurance and construction and healthcare. And I started just to look at industries. And then I thought, in my very naive way, that if I just called people, right, if I got a book of lists that you can from the LA Business Journal, and they'll list, who the top commercial brokerage houses are. They'll have a list of law firms. They'll tell you who the managing partners are, what their revenues are, how many partners they have. They'll tell you everything. I just thought I would just call people, just call them and see if I can get an appointment. So you have to have incredible tenacity. And for me, it was like, it was a very difficult financial situation. I don't want to say again, it was like a life and death, because obviously it was not. But I had 7 kids to support, and that's just a lot to do on your own. And, the money ran away very quickly and, evaporated. And then with, and I was not working at that time. It doesn't last. You've got to like be very, creative. Got to stand on your own feet, be creative, and you can learn. And I learned to ask a lot of questions. And I went to all the different courthouses. I went everywhere. And I would ask to see the judges. If you're not a lawyer, you also don't know you can't do this. I'd go up to whoever there was sitting outside the door, the bailiff or the court clerk, and I'd say, I'd find out who was, the judge on the case, or I'd watch them for a while. I'd watch the trials. And then, he or she would go, mainly they were he's, but, occasionally there was a woman. They'd go back into their chambers, and, I would ask, the person sitting there if I could talk to them. And they kind of, I think they were so taken aback, or some probably thought I was mad, but they did go and ask the judge. And once in a while, the judge would see me. One of the people that was super kind to me at the beginning was Justice Rubin. He was in Santa Monica.
Justice who? I'm sorry?
Rubin, Rubin.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and he was on the Muni court at that time. But anyway, it was an adventure. And I learned the value of rejection pretty quickly. People just tell you to go away. And so you decide, it's not personal. It's okay to be rejected. It's just all okay. Now, not everyone's going to like you. It's not going to work for everyone. And, sometimes you're just not just in the wrong place. You get to the right result, but you're in the wrong place. But I spent a lot of time hanging around, the courtrooms. And then, so I learned who the best judges were. I talked to my competitors. I tried to develop friendships with my competitors, find out, who, what was valuable in the industry. I joined every single bar association I could think of, except yours, Dan, because yours wasn't around at that time.
No,
and then I would go to these events. I'd just go from event to event to event to event. I'd go out, I don't know, 3 nights a week, sometimes 4 nights a week, everywhere. I would go everywhere and I would ask questions. And I went to the judges that are available in the private sector then, and they were all judges, and asked them if I ever found you a case, or if the case came to our office, we didn't have much of an office, would you do it, through us? And a lot of them said, no, go away. And some of like, who are you? Like, why do you? I mean, I was terrified talking to judges and lawyers, but I like made it up all the time. And then some of them said yes. They said, fine. And that's kind of how it started. But that gave me a really good understanding of the marketplace. I think I understand it better than anyone because I was there like kind of from the beginning and still manage it now.
And I do want to talk about that. I do want to talk about your view of the marketplace. I want to talk about what you think makes a good mediator. But before I do, let me just encapsulate that as best as I can for the audience. You have one heck of a story. I mean, let's just break this down. You moved from one place. You said you were a refugee from an area. You end up in Australia. Your parents are working there. You move from Australia to Canada. You have children in Canada. You move from Canada to California. You have more children in California. Your husband leaves you. You're now a single mother with 7 children. And this is what stuck with me with what you said. You said you were terrified of attorneys. You would go to the court. You didn't know who these people were. You didn't know that you couldn't just speak to the judge, but that didn't stop you. And you said you learned the value of rejection. And I have to admit, it's so inspiring to hear that. Again, guys, if you don't know how successful this woman is, you live under a rock. Okay. When you have 7 mediation facilities throughout the state of California, it ain't nothing. And the fact that you went through all of that to get to where you are today, I think what you do, and just in that few minutes that we were just chatting, you've kind of set a blueprint for success, in my opinion, which is you got to keep pushing. You got to keep trying. It reminds me, I also went to the Marshall School of Business at USC, and we would study people who had success. And there was consistencies amongst them. One of them that I'm hearing here, which is you didn't know what you were doing, but you still pushed. You didn't know that you couldn't speak to the judge, but you still pushed until you did know. And then once you gained that information, you capitalized on it.
Uh-huh.
That's powerful. That three people are standing outside the court. Person A says, I'd rather just not do it. I'm lazy today. Person B says, I need to learn more about the court before I go in there. Let me take some time. You went in there and you did it and you made the connections regardless. You didn't allow whatever you might have thought that you lacked to get in your way. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't sure what I was missing, so therefore I didn't let that impede me. If I really knew, if I knew the system like I know it now, I'd be even more terrified. But then I would be paralyzed in fear. Okay,
Oh, no.
but not knowing. So I just tell you a funny story. I would hang around downtown. The LA Superior Court downtown. It's now called Mosque, but it wasn't called
Yeah.
Mosque at that time. And I would talk to anyone who kind of came through or deposited papers. And I got to know this attorney service gentleman who would, arrive in and drop papers, whatever he did. And I asked him for a list of the judges that were on the bench, sitting on the bench. Could he give me their phone numbers? Could he give me their addresses and phone numbers? I was actually too scared to talk to them, so I kind of would write, and writing was okay in those days. And I developed a brochure so I could send them a brochure. Anyway, he did. I don't know where he got it from, but it was available somewhere there. And he gave me the list of the judges that were, the sitting judges. And now I actually discovered the difference between a muni court judge and a superior court judge, a criminal judge, versus the civil side. I didn't know any of that stuff. Didn't know anything at all. Anyway, so I wrote to them, right? And then I would follow that up with a phone number, because it was a phone number, a home phone number. And I would ask them, if I could, see them. And I didn't get much of a response to that. So I decided what I was going to do with that is just call the courtroom and see if I could meet with them. But the list that I had also included, it was very clear, the judges that had retired. And I called them and asked them if they would work through my office. And a lot of them did not reply. Most of them, the bulk of them did not reply, but some did, a number did. But we're talking about like a huge list. And you know what? Nobody asked me how I got their address or the phone number. And, it just like it was, and I never knew I wasn't supposed to have it, or that it was privileged or private information. And it was just like bizarre when I think back, all of these unusual things.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. It's like these little steps, these courageous steps that are taken, and then I get to see the end result, which is I'm speaking to you here now. After all that is done and said, I'm very curious if you could go back to your younger self when she was kicking down the doors of the court and doing what you're doing. What would you tell her?
I would probably say it was, my goal at that time really was just to, house and home, the family. My house in Santa Monica went into foreclosure. And so, I had to move out, and I moved, up Mandeville Canyon a long way. And, my children, I had to fight to have my children continue to go to the Santa Monica school system, which is where they were. So I would never have anticipated it would have grown to this size. We are now the second largest ADR firm in the state, and probably the third largest in the country. Wow. I would never have ever thought that. My goal at that time was simply, I had one little office that I rented from a law firm, and then I had access to 2 conference rooms, like twice a month. I mean, it was nothing. It was really starting from nothing. And but I would just never take no for an answer, and I never expected to grow to this size. It was just serendipitous, I guess, how all of that happened. It was just once I discovered the industry, and once I learned about the lawyers, and once I learned what role litigation, the legal system plays in the community, and in the engine of business in general, because without money, there's no lawsuit. So it's going to be there somewhere in some capacity from somebody. I really loved it. I loved that we were bringing peace back to people's lives. And, I developed the staff, and as we grew and things happen, we don't control or create the litigation, but we do make it go away. And I think or our office does, and our neutrals do. And I don't know, I just really, really liked it. I thought this was a cause, it's a mission. And what would I say to that person? I would say, could never be done. You won't be able to do this. It's okay. You can have 10 cases a week if you're very, very lucky. I mean, we're super lucky. Now we have something like 14,000 inquiries a year. And that's if you look at your practice, it's like the opportunity to have 14,000 new clients a year. That's a lot, it's huge, huge numbers. And I just wouldn't think that it would have been possible. And I don't know, it's just like, I wouldn't have thought it would be possible. So I would say, don't ever give up. Don't take no for an answer. Don't ever give up. And be tenacious, be resilient, be tenacious. People will tell you, go away. They'll tell you you can't do it. Just, don't accept that,
Be tenacious, be resilient, appreciate the lessons learned and the value of rejection. I love it. Let me ask you this question about resilience and tenacity. When you were reaching out to those judges and you're saying, hey, do you want to come and work for me? Look, I've seen the ADR Services offices now. They're gorgeous, but I'm assuming you didn't have that back then. I'm assuming you didn't have much back then, but you still reached out to these judges and said, hey, will you come be one of my neutrals? Did you have a sense of imposter syndrome as you were doing that? Did you feel insecure about it? And if so, how did you get past it?
I felt like a total charlatan. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm talking about. Somebody caught up and they said they wanted they wanted a party arbitrator. And I thought, sure, we can provide that for you. And then, I hang up and then I run to, some lawyer I'd befriended who was in the same, space as me. And I ran in there and I said, what's a party arbitrator? Right. So I didn't, it was just all fake. It was all made up. It was just, again, somebody asked you to do something, you just absolutely say yes, and then you figure out a way to do it. But I was terribly insecure and, and terribly fearful, insecure, very fearful. But I still, thought that, my life was what it was, setbacks are a part of life and that was okay. And that you need agility and flexibility. And I was willing, to see what I could do and how we could fit in. But it was a terrifying time in my life. It was actually pretty terrifying for about 7 years, from 2004 to, from 1994, 93, 94 to 2000 and, the end of the year 2000. So that was like a lot of years when I didn't know whether we were going to survive from, year to year. And then we moved from the West Side. I was on the West Side to Century City. And that was moving into Century City was like really hitting the big time. And that was in the year 2000. And I incorporated the company. Before that, it was just a DBA. It was like Action Dispute Resolution Services, DBA, Lucie Barron. I was so amateurish. So really, truly pathetic. I just want to tell you, really pathetic. I was just hoping nobody would ever find out. And then I asked questions. You know what? I wouldn't talk. And I'm talking all the time here. But usually I wouldn't talk. I would ask questions. And when you ask questions, and I found a really, a lot of different tips on networking that worked for me. And we've now, improved on and capitalized on that, we give to our neutrals and that come on board. But it was just great when you ask people questions, they actually really truly want to educate you, and they like it to teach someone who's very enthusiastic about learning. It's like being a good student. As a teacher, you want to teach that student, and I found that people really wanted to help, and it was something that was kind of new and engaging, and it helped the end product of litigation. It was incredible for the courts. It was incredible for the lawyers. It was supported by the judicial system. It was supported by the legislature. It was just, a brand new industry that was, growing and growing and growing. But, we got a lot of disdain at the beginning, because people thought it was kind of like interfering. So anyway, very exciting road.
Look, what I one, this is a theory that I've had, and really I don't know if it's my theory. I think I got this from business school, which was, it's not the fact that you felt terror. Anyone in your shoes would have felt terror. It's not that these people who are super successful don't have the same emotions as the rest of us. We all have those feelings of doubt, imposter syndrome, fear, etc. The question is not whether you have it, but what you do with it is what differentiates the successful person who stood outside the courthouse and said, "Nah, I'm not going to do it today," versus someone like you who said, "I'm going in that courthouse. I might be terrified. I might have no idea what this language even means." And then I think people attach to that. I think people appreciate enthusiasm and zeal. Like you said, a teacher wants to have a thirsty student. Um, I almost feel like I'm back at business school right now, listening to my strategic analysis class or my organizational behavior class. What gave you, what gave you the energy, the motivation to push past your fears? What kept you going?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I didn't really, haven't really thought about it, in too much psychological detail. Um, I think it was like as time went on, I, made friends with some of the lawyers and with some of the judges because they were still all, in the private sector judges, not lawyers who were going into this industry. And that has evolved over the years. And of course, you don't need that judge hat anymore. You can be a phenomenal, ADR professional as an attorney.
Hmm.
And that's, for various reasons, just the industry has really matured and has grown. So but the question is, what kept me going? I think it was because I really valued what we were doing, what I was doing. And then the lawyers became, much, more congenial and nicer to me. And I, once I could speak their language, and I kind of, and I would ask them, what their issues were and how we could help. It was always um, just what can we do to make your life better or make your life better for that of your client? How can we assist in what kind of way? Um, and uh, and I understand something which you probably do too, Dan. If you went to the Marshall's School of Business, is that the legal profession is a business. It's a business. The people that really succeed in this industry will understand the business of law, not just all of the, not just be a great information database of what the what the law is about and what your particular expertise in the law might be about, whether it's intellectual property or employment or personal injury. They really understand what drives what drives business and what drives the legal system within our financial markets, for example, and how money flows and how all of that works. And I kind of, I guess, really understood that or learned to understand it, and it just became better at it and liked it and joined like the Association of Business Trial Lawyers, for example, who represent for in many cases the Fortune 500 companies on the plaintiff side and the defense side. So that's a very different group from the Consumer Association of Attorneys of LA, the CALA group, or the Defense Counsel group. So, or the employment lawyers who are, a specialty group. And I went everywhere, and I grew to really like the lawyers, and even the ones that are always fighting, fighting with each other, and kind of helping them come to a better place, because I think my psychology background really helped, because you get nowhere by being adverse, you just alienate everyone around you. So, and there is a way to communicate, with and some lawyers have difficulties with their clients. I don't know. I had a lot more time then, so I would listen to them, give them advice, kind of get to know them, and I don't know, just there's still people within it, and I realized how difficult work is for a trial lawyer. really empathize with the trial lawyers. That's brutal. It is just going to war every day is incredibly brutal. And that's how, it is. And, we can help. How can we help? When can we help? In what capacity? Certainly we can help by providing some of the best neutrals available for the case for which they're suited. And so we developed specialties, and it was all kind of evolving at that time. But there weren't judges who, for example, specialized in construction or employment or personal injury or insurance. I mean, it was just they were on the bench and they were very, had very general backgrounds. And this is, the law industry or the legal industry was maturing so that what it really needed is, entities, lawyers who were specialists in areas, and the kind of, guy or gal who understood intellectual property was not the same person that was going to do employment cases. It was really very different. Or, insurance bad faith expert was not going to be doing construction or real estate. And we discovered the value of all of that and started to look for areas of specialization with the lawyers. And some of the lawyers are phenomenal. They're great negotiators and, very comfortable with clients and much better at mediation than someone who's been on the bench.
What I keep taking away from all this is, like you said, tenacity. It's perseverance. It's an endurance. Look, at this point, though, you won. You accomplished. Like, you got one of the biggest ADR services in the country. What keeps you getting up every morning?
It's getting better. And better. And so I'll have to, it's a long story. But you have to I'll have to show you when I chat what kind of growth has been. But I continue to really like what I do. I'm expecting that my daughter, Joanna, who's in San Francisco, who's worked for ADR Services for the last 7 years, that she will take over. I want to make sure that I teach her and position everything about the family well, but particularly ADR Services. And so, there's, it's interesting, and every case is interesting, and every fight is interesting. Every litigation is interesting and is constantly evolving. And there's so many things that are changing in the legal industry consistently, and that has nothing to do with COVID, but that has changed a lot of what has happened in the legal industry as well. And the way people live, and of course, technology, the way we communicate, the way we behave, the way we shop, the way we buy. There's so many changes. And it affects what happens in the way that we live and breathe and make choices, and then it affects everyone in the legal profession, because we are such a litigious state, as I mentioned right at the beginning, and people get into fights, and particularly LA is a lot about money. That's not a good reflection of Los Angeles, but I think it does speak to the truth.
It's kind of a cutthroat city. I mean, I was born and raised here. I've had enough, friends come to the state, leave the state to tell me what it's like and give me their opinions. I appreciate that. With regards to COVID, I have a feeling that hasn't slowed you down at all. I would not bet against Lucie Barron, especially not after this. How's everything going now?
Well, it's great. First of all, I think it was on March the 12th, they shut down LA. And March the 16th, they shut down San Francisco. And I'm looking around at this vast, space that we have in Century City, and something like 68,000 square feet of empty space across the state, and 140 neutrals of whom no one is working. All of the cases are canceled. All the cases are continued. And, and then continued some more. And Trump is coming back saying, we're going to be open by Easter, then we're going to be open by Memorial Day, then we're going to be open by, July the 4th, etc. And around May, I took a look at this. I went and read, because I love reading. You should all read, okay? I mean, it is so important to read stories and read books. I know not everyone has the time. I understand this. If you can't read, listen to a podcast or get, audiobooks or something, but you have to get that information and knowledge. And we are so strapped for time that it's really often impossible to read. But anyway, so I thought to myself, how is the pandemic going to affect a society? And of course, I never heard of the 2000 and I mean 1990, 1918, I think was Spanish flu. Never heard of that. Didn't know that it killed 50 million people around the world. Never heard of it. Heard vaguely about the bubonic, plague at the, turn of, well, actually it was, 12th or 13th, 14th century. And then there's a bunch of others along the way. And I started to realize, there was a swine flu, and no, it was the bird flu that was kind of there in between as well. And I thought, it just changes society. And so we're going to have to do something to adapt. So to cut a long story short, I looked at this it was a technological revolution like the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution took about 100 years, 150 years, and it changed the face of the planet, as any of you will know if you haven't ever looked that up. But all of the mechanisms were in place, all the engineering was in place, and it was just time. It just took a while to evolve. But once that started to evolve, there was no going back. You were not going to use your plow with your oxen. You were not going to be racing around in your horse and buggy. You were going to, once they introduced automobiles, it just changed. So our society changed, railroads changed, and then the big titans of capitalism, changed. So just everything changed. And I thought to myself, this is the same kind of thing. And it probably would have happened with technology, but it wouldn't have happened today. It may have happened in 4 or 5 years. It would have happened. We were just not ready. It was forced upon us. But we had to adapt. We at ADR Services, our staff, our clients, our neutrals had to adapt. And so we put on this, we just communicated with the legal community and the business community. And what we did is that we trained ourselves. We looked at, WebEx and Microsoft Teams and, Blue Jeans, and we decided on Zoom. And once we made that decision, we trained 25 Zoom leaders in our office. And then we trained all of our staff. And when you're in your, 20s and 30s, 40s is easy. When you're 60s and 70s, training the neutrals, not so easy. In order, I'm going to tell you, that was brutal. And so we supported them along the way. And then the lawyers wanted to look so good with their clients. And that was really important. And everyone was scared. Nobody knew anything was going. And so we trained the lawyers. We did this through many different bar associations. And like in this last year, we done 54 presentations, 27 of which are in-house. We may, that we've done, when I say in-house, we did ourselves, not affiliated with, a bar association, which is really pretty remarkable. And then we made the lawyers look good to their clients. And I love that, so, and if you want to do a mock mediation, or if you want to be trained on Zoom or mock arbitration, we would do it for you for nothing. Everything was for nothing. All this training was for nothing. We wanted to educate the legal community as to how they could survive with the changes that were there. And I didn't think they were going to go away. I think that was a critical thing. I didn't think this was going to be a temporary thing. I didn't expect the Delta variant. So I kind of thought at that point, it was kind of like on its way down. But this is not a temporary hiccup. This is a major structural change. That's the difference. And that to me is another challenge. Okay, so you want to succeed in that too. Don't forget, I'm such an underdog, right? Such an underdog. So, with such an inferiority complex. So I want to succeed, Dan. I want to do well. And I want to do well in things that I think make a mark on society. And, I can work as little as I want or as much as I want. I know so many people in the legal community, and I know our talent, and I know potential talent. And I think that, and I've, grown with them over the years, and, I know who's good out there, and it's a very exciting field, very interesting.
If you can believe it, we've almost got an hour, so let me know if you're short on time, but I certainly have questions. Okay. I am curious, just piggybacking on what you just said, how do you go about picking neutrals?
I do it by reputation, a lot by reputation, speaking, watching them sometimes. If they're on the bench, I want to see how they, relate to people. And that does take some time, because you've got to be in a trial really mostly, or, sitting with someone who has a lot of, lawyers come in and out. But then I ask a lot of lawyers. I have a lot of contacts now. So I ask what their reputation is in the community, on the bench. Um, with judges, it's very hard to tell unless they're doing settlement conferences, what they're going to be like in the private sector. I look at education, I look at background, I look at intellect, I look at whether they've been in the private sector before they went on the bench or whether they came from the, DA's office, it depends. There's so many things that contribute to that. And intellect always, and going the schools you've gone to don't always indicate that you're really terrific at what you do, or potentially it might do. So it's a whole industry again that's developed. Judges, when you became a judge, that was the epitome of the success of your career. And now, of course, there's a whole nother profession that you can tap into, that you can work at until you're 80, 85, 90. Justice Feineman died, I think, when he was 91, and he was still working on an arbitration award. I mean, it was amazing. So it's a really, truly, like I said, amazing, industry. With lawyers, how do we look? We look at lawyers who, who are completely dedicated to the process. So you have to give up lawyering. You want to do this, you have to give up lawyering. And so it's hard to do because you've got to be at a foundation, have some kind of, financial foundation where you can maybe not work for a couple of years. We look at their areas of expertise. We look at their specialties. We look to see if they've done any pro bono work already with the court, kind of what practice they've got, what kind of training they've had. There are limited options for training, very limited options for training. Essentially there's Pepperdine, and LA County has a program, but nothing very much. But it's like being to be a good trial lawyer, you can't just come out and be a good trial lawyer the day you finished law school. Or to be a good physician, you've got to do an internship, and to be a specialist, you've got to do a residency. So, being in the ADR profession is very different from being a great litigator or, being a great judge. It's just different. And I've got to learn to identify what those differences are. Areas of expertise, as I mentioned before, are just really critical. So I look at the personality of the individual and, how well they communicate and, their ability to interact with people, the ability to read people. Some people are really good at that. Some are not. Some very stiff and formal. There are just many, many attributes. I don't actually have a list, but, I do all of the recruiting in Southern California, and together with Joanna and some of my other staff in Northern California. But we have a recruiting team now too. We have like a terrific staff, many of whom have been with us for more than a decade. And, they are driven and motivated and enthusiastic, and they're all the millennial crowd. So
Okay.
I love them.
Sounds like a pretty labor intensive process to figure out what attorney. Almost feels like it's like the NFL draft. You got to do the background.
Yeah, that's right. It is.
This sounds time consuming. It sounds like you put a lot of work into that.
We do. Yeah. And it's very much like that. We recruited Justice Chin just recently. And I thought, oh my God, this is like recruiting LeBron James or Tom Brady. That's exactly how I feel. It's just like, oh, and sometimes, like we try to recruit someone and we fail. And it's the same kind of thing. It's like, yeah, it's like an NFL draft. So it's, yeah.
It's impressive. I gotta say, and I mean, I think you've always known this, Lucie. We've stayed in touch over the years, how impressed I am by you. Let me ask you, I have really two more questions for you.
Okay.
One of them is the advice that you have for lawyers, but let's put that aside for just a moment. I'm specifically curious. And I'm assuming this is even more so back when you started. Strikes me as a male-dominated industry, maybe not so much today. but it
Uh-huh.
seems like just a minute ago it was. But you, again, you came here and you did it. What was it like as a woman? What was it like dealing with that? Did it ever get in your way? Were there people who just wouldn't take you seriously? Things like that.
Yeah. Well, at the beginning, nobody would take me seriously, so that was okay. So I kind of got used to that. That didn't take too long, but I just learned, the persistence and the never giving up. So, but definitely was not taken seriously. Secondly, everyone that had retired at that time were male judges, so all male, very male dominated, and they didn't take women seriously in those days anyway. Let alone non-lawyers. That was part was being a non-lawyer being tried to take seriously. So that was really tough. I would, I had lunch with some lawyer who, very, very, nice guy, super nice guy, you know, 25, 27 years ago. And the head of the litigation department of a fairly significant firm. And he was married. And then at the end of it, he said to me, do we need a business reason to have lunch again? Right. So how do you answer that? If you say yes, right, then he's rejected because he's obviously flirting and he wants you to say, no, we don't need a business reason to have lunch again. So it was just like there was some situations like that where I felt, compromised and didn't really know what to do or what to say. But, all you need to do is smile and be happy. And then if you're a woman, and don't hate me, women, please, just sometimes play dumb. Okay. That can be very helpful. Like you don't really understand what's going on. And I don't, it was possible. It was possible to do. And I think I developed a lot of respect, over the years. And it was never, reactive, like I said, it was okay. People to say, no to me. And I would just, move on to the next situation. I worked out little tricks, like, when you go up to when people are standing in these social settings, you don't go up, if you've got someone who's standing alone, they want to talk to someone. You don't go to two people, break up the conversation. They're going to hate you. But if there's three or four, walk right in. It's the most intimidating, but walk right in because somebody will break away and you'll be able to have that conversation. And then you just introduce yourself to the rest of the group and then, find out what they do, tell them what you do, and you got to take off and go fast. But yes, you learn to be very socially aware. It's the being socially aware. It's like a really good trial lawyer. Okay. They are very aware of, who is, is on the jury and what the characteristics are. And you do that analysis even before you pick a jury. So, and then it's interesting for me. And I used to watch, go to a lot of these events, watch the best trial lawyers. So, yeah.
I don't, you said women, please don't hate me, but I had to play dumb sometimes. I don't think that's your fault. I think it's the fault of the men who put you in that position. And then you had to make a business decision. What was in the best interest of your career? So trust me, as a sexual harassment attorney, I hear stuff like that as well. Not to suggest you're being sexually harassed, but my point is, long story short, I get it. I get where you're coming from. And I get why you had to sometimes do that. It saddens my heart to hear, but I certainly hold no animosity against you. Clearly, you're a woman who knows the steps to take to get to a place. And that is why I don't know why I save these questions for the end sometimes, but I guess I just subconsciously do this. What advice do you have for the attorneys? I'm so curious. You get to see us. You get to see all of us. You come to all the Bar Association events. I see you everywhere, especially before Corona. What do you have? What's the advice for lawyers? What are we missing?
You know what, just before we go on to that, and I'll tell you in a second, the whole thing about, being a woman and, in a man's world, you can do that. You just have to be kind of, or adopt a position of being non-gender specific, so, and that's a weird kind of terminology, but, you're just a person, you're a person. And if you're a person and you're intelligent and you're interested and you want to learn and you want to understand, it doesn't really matter whether you're a male or a female, that, that disparity or, difference disappears actually pretty quickly. And it became interesting really to me that, once I kind of learned to communicate better and try to understand what people I was talking to, needed, it didn't really matter. It was hard at the beginning, because people do walk away from you or they'll make silly remarks, but it really was not, it was not impossible. I don't want to give you that impression. And I did not, I felt neglected. I felt rejected. I felt, a lot of other things along those ways, that sense, but I never felt harassed. I was never feeling that, compromised in that capacity. So anyway, advice for attorneys. Okay. Yes, I've met so many of you along the way. And it's been a wonderful learning experience for me in life, in humanity, in personalities, in talent, and intellect, and in interests. Like so many people are so incredibly diverse. And I've loved all of that. And I think the advice I have, if you're starting off as an attorney, I guess, is be very client-centric. If you want to get clients, you need to know what your client needs. And it's not just they want to sue the other side and it's a chunk of change. It's not always about the money, even though I mentioned that, as being part of the culture of Los Angeles, but it's not always about the money. It's about, they want to feel, righted against some wrong. Or on the other side, they maybe feel that they haven't done any wrong. So you have to understand, the entity, the person, and you particularly have to be responsive to your client. You have to also, like I mentioned to you, understand the legal community in which you're working, the business community in which you're working, because that's what really drives everything around us, including litigation. But it's really important to kind of understand where what you're doing fits in, where what is happening. The legal field is evolving. It's always been evolving, continues to evolve. It evolves slowly, has evolved slowly, but it evolves. And those who experience, success, I think that they're the ones that bring the new solutions to the industry. And a lot of these solutions today are based on technology. You have to understand how technology fits into the patterns of how we live, and things as the beginning, how we live, how we breathe, how we communicate, how we shop, how we buy, how we entertain ourselves. And it's changing. The world today is a very different place to where it was a decade ago, and certainly to where it was 2 years ago. So I also think it's really important for young lawyers, do not take no for an answer. Okay. So it's never, and don't stop knocking on doors, even if no one answers. You just have to stay with it. And it's okay to not succeed. If you don't succeed, you just learn, about what didn't work and why it might work next time, what you did that or didn't do, or that you were missing. And I do that all the time. And I kind of walk away from some meetings and I just want to kick myself. Think, oh, why didn't I think of that at that time? I just missed that. So, that's okay too. I think the best way to look at things is if you do have a failure, that expect the failures. There will be failures. You have to expect them. You have to learn to pick up and, take yourself off the ground and go forward and, learn from whatever it was around you that had happened. And that is a lot easier to deal with if you know it is coming. If you know that that there's a chance that not everything's going to go your way, and things that you thought would succeed don't. People you thought that you could trust disappoint you. Expect that. That's all. Setback is a part of life. Just expect setbacks. I think if you have the expectation that you're not going to be on because it happened with me too. You're not on a trajectory that's always going up. You're going to have some lulls along the way, and you're going to have many bumps. And if that's the expectation, and you have a positive attitude, then I think you're just going to do really well. And I think it's possible to do really well, and to look at every problem as not a problem. Like when I looked at COVID at that time, I thought, this is a new challenge. The challenge. This is not going to be a disaster for us. Originally, I thought actually it was going to be a disaster because I thought I'm not going to be able to pay the rent here, all my staff, but we didn't let anyone go at all.
Nice.
And and we didn't renegotiate with any of our leases. We just figured out a different way to succeed. And I think that's the thing that I would say to young people and young lawyers.
Hey, it's interesting. You were doing that earlier, figuring out how to succeed, and here you are. You're still doing it with COVID, figuring out how to adapting to all these things. I heard a quote one time. I'm going to butcher it, but I'll try my best. And it was something like to the guy who's sailing his ship. It's not the direction of the wind, but how he sets his sail in response to the direction of the wind that determines where he ends up. And that quote feels very at home in this conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
I wish we did this on Monday. I could have carried the inspiration into the weekend. By Monday, I'll have forgotten. But I wish we did this on Monday. Look, I knew getting into this pod, we really wanted you on the podcast. I knew that it would be an inspirational story. Frankly, I've heard portions of it before. So I knew where this was headed. I'm hoping anyone who's listening at home that you take this, that I don't care if you're in law, if you're starting a new business, whatever it might be. Look at what this woman has accomplished and look at the hardship she got through to accomplish it. In fact, I'll even take it a step further. I've surveyed a lot of people. A lot of the most successful people I know are the ones who dealt with hardship. It's almost like overcoming the hardship is gives you a specific program or advantage or something that you can switch a disadvantage into an advantage that way. So, look, I'm inspired. I appreciate the time. I know you're a busy woman. If you can believe, we almost went an hour and a half. It flew by to me. I thought we're like 20 minutes. Almost an hour and a half. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but
I want to say something before
please,
we go, because you may not ask me this question. Now I'm sure you won't. I was so desperate to become an American. Okay, so desperate. So we finally ended up in the United States. And when you don't live in the United States, you call it America. You don't call it the United States. But anyway, so desperate to get here after like 3 rejections along the way and living in 4 different countries. And so I had applied for citizenship. I couldn't do it for until after I'd been here around 18 years or so. So it wasn't like right away. Maybe it was a little bit longer, but it was around that time because Australians did not allow dual nationality. And I didn't want to lose my Australian nationality because I was an immigrant to Australia. And so I could never regain that if my parents came there and I just adopted the citizenship as a child. I didn't want to give up my Australian citizenship, and they have very strict border controls, as we all know. So anyway, I applied for American citizenship, and the day I thought I was awarded the citizenship, such a great honor, and it was at the convention center downtown. I met Neil Armstrong.
Really?
And then he died about 8 months later.
Oh.
So, and the reason he was there is because I remember the Jonathan Club. That was also very much a man's club in the olden days, but things have changed. And so, and he was there, and I was trying to get a ticket, to see him. And of course, he was totally sold out, and I couldn't get in. And I applied for too late. You have to send an email saying that you would like to reserve dinner, and or a spot at the dinner table. But a long story short, I was, had just given a citizenship. They took away my green card. I felt very sad because I looked very cute on the green card. And it was just given to me like many years ago at that time. But they take all of that away. But I'm so excited to be an American citizen now. So I went for a drink with some of my staff and some of my random kids. And here we are. I get a call from the Jonathan Club because my last name is Barron. That is not my natural name. That's my married name. I have a very Russian sounding name. And and I'll tell you what it is in a second. So anyways, they called me up from the Jonathan Club, and this is about 5:05, and they wanted the room full when he came in. And so they said, we've just had a cancellation. Would you like to come? Okay. So I drove from the convention center because I don't live on the, downtown, to the Jonathan Club. I was there right on time. It was the most phenomenal feeling in the world to become an American citizen and meet Neil Armstrong on the same day.
That is incredible. And look, I trust me, I was born here. I had that privilege. My parents weren't. They gave
Yeah,
me the story about when they got their citizenship.
yeah,
I know this country does not give out citizenships easily. I know that, and I know it's a really big deal. So I
yeah.
appreciate that. You appreciate these things because you know what it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
to have them.
So exciting.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
exciting.
When
But
you
this is my Russian name. This is my real name, which you don't know. So it's Ludmila Alexandrovna Sidorovich.
I've never heard you with a Russian accent before. I've always heard you in
Yeah,
Australia. Can you give us that one more time?
Ludmila, which is like Ludmila. So it's like Lucia, it's an abbreviation, and Lucy came from that. The Germans write down on my passport Lucie. And I don't know why they use the IE because it's kind of the French Lucy and the Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens book. But anyway, that was the name. And so it's Ludmila Alexandrovna Sidorovich. Alexandrovna means like Alex or Alexievich, the daughter of Alex Sidorovich, so, but you pronounce it Alexandrovna because I'm a woman. I'm a daughter of, Alex Sidorovich. So Ludmila Alexandrovna Sidorovich. And I used to be fluent in Russian, Dan, and I'm not any longer. Very sad.
How
I can
many
read
people
my
know your
Russian, but I
Russian
can't
name?
remember it.
How many
Huh?
how many people know your Russian name?
Nobody.
This
I
is
never
the
talk about it. I
this
just
is
what they
this is the
tell
great
you.
reveal on the Schmoozin with Forouzan podcast. I'm flattered. I'm flattered. But look, I am so happy we brought you on. And just to
Thank
finish up
you.
that last point, again, someone immigrates to this country, I think their view of it is different than those of some of the people who may be born here, in the sense that you really appreciate getting that citizenship. Whereas I just had it because I was born here. There was no effort on my part. There's never a sense of loss or a sense of gain. So I get it. I get where you're coming from, and I appreciate the value. And of course, meeting Neil Armstrong's really cool. And going to the Jonathan Club, I know that they just opened one in Santa Monica, which is gorgeous as well. So sounds like that was a very fun day for you.
It definitely was. I
Yeah,
love this country. There's no country in the world where you can come as an immigrant and do and become successful.
yeah, yeah.
So I really I've honored the people that I've met along the path of life.
I
I
appreciate
want
that.
to thank you all.
Oh, well, you don't think? Trust me, it's not. I was the one who signed off on the paperwork, though. If I was, I would have, but I wasn't. But anyways, Lucie, thank you. I honestly, we'd love to have you back on here at some point in the
Thank
future.
you.
This is an inspiring podcast. Like I said, I wish I listened to it on Monday. You are an inspiration to men and women alike, maybe especially to women because of what you overcame. And it's my privilege that I get to sit here and ask you questions and you answer them. So thank you. I hope the audience is appreciating this opportunity as much as I am.
Oh, thank you, Dan. My privilege to be here. Thank you for asking me.